What's up guys, hope you're having a good day. In this video we're going to be taking a deep dive into all of the main card fights taking place this weekend at UFC Fight Night Aliskerov versus Whittaker. Hopefully you'll be able to use the information in this video to make better betting decisions, maybe even earn some extra cash. But before we get into the main event on this week's card, we need to talk about something very serious. So we perform really well at everything that we do. You can see our profitability chart for live betting has consistently trended up over the last 8 years. And if you look at our results on pre-fight betting, I'm sorry for the messy webpage, we're still rebuilding the website at the moment. But as you can see, dating back to August 2022, we've been on a nice, steady, consistent uptrend, making really nice gains. So we perform really well on everything that we do. Made a profit every single year we've been betting on the UFC. And the main reason in which we're able to do that is by being patient enough to wait for those super strong positions for us to put our money in. And when it comes to pre-fight betting, we know that when we're patient enough to only put our money in super strong positions, we have these winning runs where, you know, our profits trend up and we consistently make profits with very little drama, very little downswings, very little variance. But when we force bets, when we become impatient, when we're not as strict with our criteria around the bets that we place, that's when we can run into these long periods of break even that we really, really want to avoid. So it's really important to keep that in mind in times like this, because I don't really know what Dana is doing at the moment, but the last 2 or 3 UFC events have been utterly dreadful. They've been absolutely terrible. Just very, very low quality. No effort has gone into the matchmaking at all. And just very uninteresting fights for the most part, which are absolutely dead for betting. And this card's exactly the same. It's a very uninteresting card, in my opinion. You know, they obviously had some bad luck with Chimaev pulling out, but outside of the main event, it's still an event with just very, very poor matchmaking. Like, if you look at all the fights on this card, you know, there's 11 fights on the card. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 big favourites out of, you know, 11 fights. So it's a dead card, man. Very, very bad card. So why am I talking like this? Why do I need to bring this up? I need to bring this up because obviously haven't had any bets recently. Haven't had many bets on UFC pre-fight betting recently. And there's not a lot I can do about that. You know, I'm not going to go out there and place bullshit bad bets or force bets if there aren't anything worth, you know, if there aren't any bets worth placing, right? So I know it's boring, I know it's frustrating, but if you look at our profitability chart, we know we hit periods like this every once in a while where there's just nothing to bet, and we've just got to accept that and be patient and keep it tight, and obviously know that really good betting opportunities are only ever around the corner, and if we keep it tight, we'll be able to make profits pretty soon. What we don't want to do is force bets and jump into bets and potentially take losses that when decent betting opportunities do inevitably come along in the next few weeks, all we're really doing is getting back to break even to recover money that we've lost from forcing bets during this real stale period in the UFC schedule where these events are just absolutely dreadful, terrible for betting. This is becoming more common in the UFC, to be fair. I said earlier in the video, I don't know what Dana is doing at the moment. I really don't know what Dana is doing at the moment. I really don't. You know, last week, what did we have? We had, is it Brady Highstand and, you know, Garrett Armfield as the co-main event. I mean, what are we even doing in 2024? Dana, what are you doing? People make excuses like the roster's grown, they're doing more events than ever before. It's all bullshit. they were doing a similar number of events 5 years ago, and we weren't getting runs of cards like this, which were just absolutely dreadful. The problem's the matchmaking. No effort is going into the matchmaking, which means we're getting really just dead, uninteresting, stylistic matchups on fights that are just not good for betting because the styles are uninteresting and just shit, basically. So I don't know what Dana's doing, man. I don't know what he's doing, you know. I don't know what he's doing. The UFC these days seem to ebb and flow between having, you know, 3, 4, 5 weeks of amazing fights, and we were saying this earlier in the year where, you know, going back across, you know, March, April and May, actually, there were so many good fights, so many good events. It was incredible. And now we've had this 2, 3, 4 week period where it's just been fucking dreadful. Hopefully things start to turn next week. UFC 303 could be good. But man, I just wanna say this straight off the jump, because obviously, like, what am I supposed to do on a card like this? It's fucking shit. There's nothing worth betting. It's fucking dreadful. So obviously I put just as much time as always researching these fights. But I can't pull a fucking rabbit out of a hat and find a bet where you're not going to find one. And look, people will gamble on this card. They'll place bets, wherever. They'll think, you know, these bets are great, whatever. That's on them. That's their style. That's the way they do things. But like I say, we've made really nice, steady, consistent profits over the last 2 years. We've performed so well, and we've got a really robust strategy and system that enables us to consistently grind out profits on pre-fight bets, and we need to stick to it and wait for those strong positions to come along, and we ain't getting any on this card, and we haven't had any on the last couple either. So it sucks, man. It absolutely sucks. Anyway, let's get into breaking down the first fight that I want to talk about on this week's card, which is going to be the main event between Robert Whittaker and Ikram Aliskerov. So if we start off by taking a look at the odds on this one, we can see that Whittaker is the favourite at average odds of around 1.65, which is going to be minus 154 for an implied probability of 61%. And if we take a look at the odds on Aliskerov, he's around an average of 2.25, which is going to be plus 125 for an implied probability of 44%. So Whittaker is 33 years old, 6 foot tall with a 73.5 inch reach. Aliskerov, 31 years old, 6 foot tall with a 76 inch reach. So on paper, both guys roughly the same age, roughly the same size. Little bit of a reach advantage for Aliskerov, nothing major. However, it is worth noting that both these guys definitely on opposite career trajectories. Aliskerov training full-time at ATT these days, so you know he's going to be making big improvements from fight to fight. He's a lot younger in his UFC career than Whittaker is, whereas Whittaker definitely in the tail end of his career now. He's been in a lot of wars, he's got a lot of miles on the clock, he's had a lot of serious injuries, he's taken a lot of damage, and has already started to decline in my opinion. So both guys on opposite career trajectories. So what you're going to get with a fight like this, if you go on MMA Twitter or you watch a bunch of YouTube breakdown videos, is you're going to have a bunch of people telling you Aliskerov is an absolute beast because he's from Russia, his name ends in Ov, he trains at ATT, he's got a beard. Lots of people are going to be very, very high on him. So what we need to do with guys like Aliskerov is cut through all the bullshit and ignore people on MMA Twitter, ignore people on YouTube, and just focus on the fight footage to figure out what is true. And what I'm going to do is play one of Aliskerov's fights in this breakdown video so you can see for yourself what he looks like, and then this breakdown video will make a lot more sense to you. Because if I don't show you this video footage and I tell you how I think this fight is most likely to go, a lot of people disagree with me because some guy on YouTube said Aliskerov's a future champion, he's amazing, he's some kind of beast, etc, etc, etc. So if we take a look at Aliskerov's record, the big problem with this guy is that we don't know very much about him. all of his fights in the UFC have ended very quickly, and while he has looked very impressive, all of his fights in the UFC have been against a relatively low level of opponent or an inconsistent type of fighter such as Phil Hawes, Wally Alves, do have a tendency to implode, perform badly, underperform, quit, that kind of thing. So the last time we really got a good look at Aliskerov to assess his strengths and weaknesses was all the way back in 2022 when he fought Nashon Burrell. Now this is problematic because the fight was 2 years ago, and Aliskerov's been training at American Top Team full time since then, which is the best MMA gym in the world. So Aliskerov could have improved a lot in that time. But these 3 fights don't really tell us very much, because they all ended quickly. They're all against a much lower level of opponent than Robert Whittaker. So this Burrell fight is pretty damn important in giving us clues as to what Aliskerov will look like this weekend, particularly if the fight goes past round 1. He doesn't have tons of experience going very deep in fights. So what I'm going to do, if you're watching this on YouTube, I may have to blur this out due to copyright. Hopefully I won't have to. But if this is blurred, then go over to my website, MMABettingTips.com, where you'll be able to find the uncensored version. We should be able to use it under free use, but you know how YouTube can be. Okay, so let's turn off the fucking subtitles and let's just play this fight. And what I'm going to do is break this fight down while this fight is playing, so that I give my perspective on this fight based on what we know about Aliskerov. But just watch this performance, because forget what the motherfuckers are saying on the YouTube breakdown videos or on MMA Twitter. There'll be motherfuckers out there telling you Aliskerov's going to do this, 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 and this. They have no idea, because we've barely seen this guy in 2 years. So they should be basing their opinion on this fight. So here we go. So Aliskerov is in, obviously, the black shirts with the little red bits, the ATT logo. Okay, cool. So obviously, when you look at Aliskerov's performances in the UFC so far that have ended really quickly, he moves well, he's got decent MMA grappling, decent power in his hands, fast hands, good boxing, he looks decent. I'm not going to take anything away from him. But like I say, those fights were against a very low level of opponent, and those fights ended very, very quickly. What we've really got to ask ourselves is how will Aliskerov look into the second and third rounds. And this fight against Nashon Burrell gives us some clues as to how he will look into the second and third rounds. Because the thing about this fight is, when we take a look at this matchup, it's a 5-round main event, right? So Aliskerov hasn't got much experience going 3 rounds. You know, most of his fights have ended in round 1. So if he hasn't got much experience going for 3 rounds, now all of a sudden he's thrown into a 5-round main event against one of the greatest middleweights of all time. That ain't an easy thing to deal with. It's a big step up in competition for Aliskerov. So if we consider how these two match up from a stylistic point of view, cardio is a bit of an unknown for Aliskerov. Whittaker, we know, can go hard for 5 rounds, no problem. We've seen him do it countless times. But what I will say is, if you look at this Burrell fight, Aliskerov did look very flat in the 3rd round. He slows down a lot in this fight, which you guys will see when we get to it. So, in terms of how these two match up from a stylistic point of view, Aliskerov has looked very sharp from what we've seen from him in his UFC fights. But there's a real flatness to his striking in the Nashon Burrell fight. So, if Aliskerov shows up and looks like he has done in his recent UFC fights, but looks like that for like 25 minutes and doesn't slow down, then I could see the fight being competitive on the feet. But if Aliskerov shows up looking like he did against Burrell, or only looks sharp on the feet for 1 round and then starts to slow like an Abus Magomedov, then I think Whittaker lights him up on the feet, makes it look very, very easy, chips away at him, absolutely cruises. Now, in terms of how these two match up when it comes to grappling, Aliskerov is a good MMA grappler for sure, but he doesn't seem to have a lot of physicality to his grappling. Like you're seeing it here with a Nashon Burrell fight. He's sticking to Burrell like glue. He's wet blanketing him, but he is struggling to get him down and obtain a dominant position, and that comes from a lack of physicality. What I also really notice in this Nashon Burrell fight is Aliskerov slows a lot in rounds 2 and 3. He's way flatter in rounds 2 and 3. Like, he struggles to obtain dominant positions in this first round where he's at his freshest. And so in rounds 2 and 3, when he starts to fade a bit, like, his grappling just gets more and more ineffective. And the issue with that, when you're facing someone like Robert Whittaker, is that Whittaker has obviously got very, very good takedown offense, and he's almost impossible to take down. If you go through Robert Whittaker's career, no one has been able to out-grapple him. Now, there will be some people that will be like, oh, you know, Duplessis held him down. True, but Whittaker was hurt very badly before that and was dropped, where obviously he had his nose smashed, took a lot of damage. But in terms of like MMA grappling, taking Whittaker down with wrestling, holding him down, no one's ever been able to do that. Whittaker's takedown offense, ability to work his way back up to his feet, ability to scramble is absolutely top tier. And as you can see from this footage of this first round between Burrell and Aliskerov, yes, Aliskerov has kind of hugged Burrell a lot, but hasn't really achieved that much in terms of taking Burrell down or obtaining dominant positions. And we know Whittaker is almost impossible to take down and hold down. So what this fight says to me is that Aliskerov will find it very, very difficult to use a grappling heavy game plan against Robert Whittaker, unless Aliskerov has significantly improved his MMA grappling since this fight, which he might have done because this is 2 years ago, or unless, you know, this was just a bad performance from Aliskerov, an off night. I don't really see Aliskerov having much success with his grappling, if I'm being honest, based on this performance. So we can see a little bit of his striking now. Just looks very flat-footed, doesn't read Burrell very well, relatively slow hand speed. Nothing special, just bang average to me. And if we think about the things that Whittaker does really well, he's got great footwork, great movement, he's really good at reading his opponents, gets in and out of range very well, manages distance very well. He's got a good kicking game, a very nice jab. You know, I just look at this fight against Nashon Burrell and I visualise Whittaker kind of bouncing around in and out with a lot of footwork in there. And I just don't see exactly what Aliskerov could do to cause him a problem. I mean, he lands a nice head kick there, but for me, Aliskerov's striking is just very basic, to say the very least. He just looks very flat, very basic. And again, goes back to hugging Burrell here. And reaps Burrell's legs out from underneath him. Now, I don't want this video to be super long, so I'm just going to try and skip through little bits here. Just to try and speed through it a bit if we can, because I don't really have a lot more to say in breaking down this fight. There we go. He had a little bit of top control, but then went overly aggressive on a Kimura attempt, which gave Burrell time and space he needs to scramble back up to his feet. There we go. And so now we're 2 minutes left to go in round 2. And you start to see Aliskerov slow a bit at this point in the fight, which is pretty notable to me because, like I say, this is a 25-minute fight against Robert Whittaker. And we know that Robert Whittaker is an absolute cardio machine. So if Whittaker can make Aliskerov work really, really hard here, I think we could see a type of situation like what we had with Abus Magomedov versus Sean Strickland, where Aliskerov just isn't going to be able to keep up with the pace that Robert Whittaker sets for 25 minutes. And again, you can just see Aliskerov taking big deep breaths here, his mouth is open wide, and he's just grinding on Burrell up against the cage. And we'll skip through just because, you know, we don't want the breakdown to be super long. They just kind of hug it out towards the end of the round. So now if we look at the third round, Aliskerov goes with a takedown very early, but then they get back to the middle of the octagon, right? Here we go. And then we'll watch the we will watch this third round, and then we'll wrap this one up. So this is the third round. Bear in mind it's a 5-round fight against Whittaker. So again, just looks really flat on the feet. Flat striking, not the best movement. Doesn't read Burrell particularly well. Just a real flatness to everything that Aliskerov does. And the big thing for me is Aliskerov's offensive wrestling doesn't look particularly good. There's a real flatness and a lack of physicality to that as well. Like I say, a lot of guys on MMA Twitter, a lot of guys on YouTube videos will be bumping their gums about how amazing Aliskerov is. They might be right. He might be amazing, but they haven't got a fucking clue whether he is or isn't, because this fight is all we've got to go on, and this fight shows me that he isn't amazing, actually. Doesn't mean he hasn't improved to the level where he's the best middleweight in the world now, but if you say he's one of the best middleweights in the world now, you're guessing. Basically, you are guessing, because we don't have the footage to confirm whether or not that is true. So it's really, 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 really important with fights like this to cut through the bullshit, look at the fight footage, because the fight footage is the only place you'll find truth and honesty. And to me, Aliskerov looks very average. So we'll just try and, can we skip through a little bit just to try and get through this, and then we can wrap up breaking down this fight and move on to the next one, which is Alexander Volkov versus Sergey Pavlovich. So again, you can just see a lot of flatness to everything that Aliskerov does. Mouth open wide, flatness, sloppy strikes, slow hand speed, slow kicks. Just a real flatness to everything that he does. So in fact, what we can do is we just watch this 2 minutes tick down. I can start to summarise this one from a betting point of view. Obviously, Whittaker's a slight favourite. Aliskerov is a slight underdog. I think you have to be crazy to bet Aliskerov this weekend, if I'm being honest. If you bet on Aliskerov this weekend, you are totally gambling on him improving a lot from this Burrell fight in the last 2 years, because if this version of Aliskerov shows up, Robert Whittaker will make this look very easy. He will absolutely dominate. So the only fighter you should even consider betting in this fight would be Robert Whittaker. You would have to be out of your mind to bet on Aliskerov this weekend. It's total gambling. Now, I'm not going to be betting this fight personally, just because Aliskerov trains full-time at ATT. He's a young, hungry bull. Whittaker's on a decline. We've no idea how much Aliskerov has improved in the last 2 years. So for me, Aliskerov is a complete unknown. For me, this is not a strong position for me to put my money. No matter who I bet on this weekend, I'm gambling if I bet this fight. But the way I would look at this is, we know a lot more about Whittaker. It's not that likely Aliskerov will have improved so much in the last 2 years that he'll look totally different from what we see here. And like I say, if this version of Aliskerov shows up against Whittaker on Saturday night, he's getting smoked. He's getting dominated. So that's how I see this fight from a betting point of view. It is Whittaker or pass. And if anyone tells you they're betting Aliskerov this weekend, just be kind to them, because they've probably got some big issues. And just be nice to them. Don't make fun of them or anything like that. Maybe tell them they may want to give up betting on MMA gambling because they're probably not going to be very good at it if they're betting guys like this. And we literally don't know anything about where he's at in 2024. And like I say, I'm not saying this guy isn't the best middleweight in the world. He might be. All I'm saying is, if you bet him this weekend, you're gambling because you've got no fucking clue where the version of Aliskerov the Foot Burrell is showing up, or like the greatest middleweight of all time is showing up, or anything in the middle, right? We've got no idea what we're getting this weekend. So there's just no point in betting this fight. It's just gambling. You're just gambling. Just wait for those stronger positions to come along. Be patient. You know, look at our profitability chart. We do so good betting on the UFC. There's just no need to gamble. We can be patient and get stronger positions for us to put our cash. So if we take a look at the over-under on this one, my lean would be on over 2.5 rounds, just because Aliskerov doesn't look at all dangerous to me in that Burrell fight. Whittaker has developed more into a volume striker these days. Back in the day, he had some power in his hands, but these days it's rare that he knocks people out. Having said that, I do think this could be one of those situations where Aliskerov turns out to be a little bit like an Momedov and is nowhere near as good as people think he is, and he's going to be way out of his depth against Whittaker, and perhaps Whittaker just absolutely outclasses him, smokes him, finishes him, gets him out of there in a couple of rounds. Obviously 12.5 minutes is a long time in the octagon if you're way out of your depth, and so there is the potential for that happening. The skill gap could be massive here, and so because of that, I wouldn't touch the over-under, but my lean would be on the over. And then if we take a look at the prop bets on this one, the prop that I would go for, so the odds on Whittaker by knockout or TKO are absolutely terrible. Odds on Whittaker to go by decision are absolutely terrible as well. Yeah, I'm not really too keen on the props there, so I would give that a miss. There's nothing I really like prop betting related. Let's move on to the next fight. Now let's break down the next fight on this card, which is going to be Alexander Volkov versus Sergey Pavlovich. So if we start off by taking a look at the odds on this one, we can see that Pavlovich is the favourite at average odds of about 1.42, which is going to be minus 238 for an implied probability of 70%. If we take a look at the odds on Volkov, he's around an average of 2.90, which is going to be plus 190 for an implied probability of 34%. So Volkov is 35 years old, 6'7" with an 80-inch reach, and Pavlovich, 32 years old, 6'3" with an 84-inch reach. So it's not very often that Volkov doesn't have a reach advantage, but Pavlovich actually has a 4-inch reach advantage over him, which is kind of crazy. Now, even though there's not that big of a difference in age, Volkov has had a lot more fights than Pavlovich. In fact, not too far away from treble the amount of fights that Pavlovich has had. And we know Volkov has taken a ton of damage in his career. He's been in a lot of wars, whereas Pavlovich, the majority of his fights have ended in round 1. So he hasn't had as much wear and tear on the body, hasn't taken as much damage, and doesn't have any miles or as many miles on the clock. And therefore, you know, Volkov we know is starting to decline. Pavlovich should be getting better from fight to fight. So, in terms of how I view this fight from a betting point of view, very, very similar to Aliskerov and Whittaker. It's very difficult to predict how this is likely to go, simply because even though Pavlovich has had a good number of fights in the UFC, all of them have ended in round 1. So we don't really know anything about him, to be honest with you. We know that he has a kill or be killed style. He likes to come out super reckless, trying to kill everyone and knock him out in round 1. Paid the price for that style in his last fight against Tom Aspinall. But he's big, he's strong, he hits hard, he's aggressive, and when someone like that is coming after you, swinging for the fences, very, very difficult not to get caught with something, especially when you're kind of long, tall, lanky, and quite slow, such as Volkov is. But what we do know about Volkov is, even though his striking defense isn't the best, he is a tough fucker. We take a look at his record. He's had 47 pro fights and hasn't been knocked out in a very long time. Last time he was knocked out was 6 years ago against Derek Lewis, and he has fought some big hitters since then: Greg Hardy, Walt Harris, Alistair Overeem, Sorgan, Tom Aspinall, Rosenstrike, Tuivasa. None of these guys have been able to knock him out. So He is tough, he is durable, he does have a good chin, but obviously you don't want to be taking clean hard shots from a guy like Pavlovich, because he's got true legit one-shot knockout power in everything that he throws. So, in terms of how these two match up stylistically, we don't really know anything about Pavlovich's grappling, just because he looks to try and kill everyone on the feet in his fights. I can't imagine this fight will go to the ground. Volkov's offensive wrestling isn't the best. Pavlovich never tries to take anyone down. So, most likely going to be a stand-up fight. If Pavlovich did try to use wrestling in this fight, he probably would have some success, because Volkov's takedown offense is very bad. He's very, very weak off his back. But like I say, Volkov hasn't shown any indication to us that he'd be looking to grapple in his UFC fights. So, until we see him start to try to grapple, we can assume he probably isn't going to. And in terms of how they match up stylistically on the feet, Pavlovich's style is obviously very reckless. He puts himself in a lot of danger when he comes forward aggressively, trying to knock his opponents out. And he paid the price for that against Aspinall. And this is a risky strategy to use against guys like Derek Lewis or Tai Tuivasa, who can counter you with one big shot and knock you out, put you away. But Volkov doesn't really have knockout power. He's one of these heavyweights that's more of a volume striker. So in that respect, it's not a bad stylistic matchup with Pavlovich, because he won't have to worry too much about eating a big counter and getting knocked out here. I'm not saying Volkov can't counter him and knock him out, because obviously Volkov is a big guy, and Pavlovich is very wild, very reckless, very bad defensively. He only takes one shot. It's just much less likely that Pavlovich will get knocked out by Volkov than someone like Lewis or Tuivasa. However, we also know Volkov is very durable. He's got a very good chin, and guys like Pavlovich are prone to adrenaline dumping. Guys like Pavlovich who come out the gate really hard in round one, trying to kill his opponents, and if he doesn't get them out in round one, tends to fade very hard in rounds 2 and 3. That could happen here. We don't know for sure. Pavlovich might have amazing cardio, but he doesn't have much experience going past round 1. Hasn't been past round 1 in 7 years, which is a very long time. So it'll be interesting to see how it goes if this fight goes into the second round, because we know Volkov does have very good cardio for a heavyweight. So Pavlovich is most likely to win. He's big, he's scary, he hits hard. Volkov's kind of slow, not the best defensively, but he's a tough fucker. So if you really want to bet this fight, you have to bet Volkov. You'd have to be crazy to bet Pavlovich as a big favourite when the guy's barely been in a fight in the last 7 years. This lasted more than 2 minutes. So, yeah, terrible bet to bet Pavlovich. He's too big of a favourite. His odds command an implied probability of 70%. There's no upside in betting Pavlovich. He could gas, he could adrenaline dump, he could get caught with a big shot because he's reckless. So if you really want to bet this fight, you've got to take Volkov. It is dog or pass. Having said that, I don't really want to be betting on a stiff, slow 34-year-old heavyweight with tons of miles on the clock against the young, hungry, aggressive bull that is going to be swinging for the fences and trying to kill him. So for me, this is an easy pass. You're putting your money in a lot of danger. Well, I wouldn't necessarily say that. I would say you're not putting your money in a particularly good position, no matter who you bet on this fight. My lean is obviously the under. It's possible that we may see Pavlovich fight a little bit safer and smarter this week. After being knocked out against Aspinall, perhaps he'll realise that his style is kind of reckless and unsustainable, and as he faces a higher level of opponent, he will be made to punish for his recklessness. So maybe we'll get a slower, more strategic, smarter performance from Pavlovich this weekend. But obviously all we can do is make the best decision possible with the information we've got available. And so my lean would actually be... sorry, I do think the over 1.5 rounds may give you the better risk to reward ratio at dog odds, on the basis that Pavlovich may fight a little bit safer and smarter than usual, but until we see that, it would be kind of foolish to bet against the under with how all of Pavlovich's UFC points have gone up to this point. And in terms of the props, bookies thinking most likely outcome Pavlovich by knockout or TKO. I'd actually go on the flip side, because the odds on this are terrible. So this is not something I'll be betting myself. I think this is not a good bet. But if you want to sprinkle a little bit of money on this fight to make watching it more interesting, Probably take Volkov by knockout or TKO. 4.50 plus 350 on the basis that Pavlovich is very reckless. Volkov is a big guy, so Pavlovich could get caught with a big counter and knocked out again like he did against Aspinall. Or perhaps he adrenaline dumps, or perhaps he gasses, and if that happens, perhaps Volkov gets him out either on the ground with ground and pound, or on the feet lands a big shot when Pavlovich is too tired to defend himself. So that's how I see this fight, and I hope you found that useful. So now let's break down the fight between Kelvin Gastelum and Daniel Rodriguez. So if we start off by taking a look at the odds on this one, we can see that Gastelum is the favourite at average odds of around 1.44, which is going to be minus 227 for an implied probability of 69%. If we take a look at the odds on Rodriguez, he's around an average of 2.90, which is going to be plus 190 for an implied probability of 34%. So Gastelum is 32 years old, 5'9" with a 71.5 inch reach. Rodriguez, 37 years old, 6'1" with a 74 inch reach. So we can see Rodriguez will be a bit bigger, have a slightly longer reach than Gastelum, and also will be 5 years older. Rodriguez at 37 years old is pretty old for the division and the kind of fighter that you would expect to be declining from fight to fight. And I think, to be fair, we are starting to see decline in Rodriguez from fight to fight. And of course, the other thing we need to talk about for this matchup this weekend is that it would appear that this fight is now taking place at middleweight. We haven't had absolute confirmation yet, but some articles broke today which basically said that Gastelum was struggling with the weight. He was trying to get a 180 pound catch weight sorted out for this fight instead of the fight being at 170 pounds, and Daniel Rodriguez is saying he's now agreed for the fight to actually be at middleweight. So I don't think any of this stuff really has that much of an impact on the fight, if I'm being honest. We've seen Gastelum have issues like this in a lot of fights throughout his career, and he always performs like as you'd expect him to perform. You know, Gastelum is a tough guy, he does have a good chin, he's very durable, you know, has great cardio. So it's not like this kind of stuff usually affects Kelvin. Obviously it's not great, but it does add a little bit more risk to betting on Gastelum as a pretty big favourite coming into this matchup. So in terms of how these two match up from a stylistic point of view, obviously they're both primarily strikers. I wouldn't expect to see that much grappling from either guy. Both guys have pretty bad takedown offense. They're both pretty easy to hold down. But they very rarely try to take their opponents down. So this is probably going to be a stand-up fight. If it's a stand-up fight, it does favour Gastelum. He's the better boxer out of the two. He's got better footwork. He's got better movement. He throws a higher volume of strikes. He's got a granite chin. He's got great cardio. He can put it on Rodriguez for 3 rounds. I wouldn't be surprised if this fight is visually close, because Rodriguez is a pretty good striker, and to be fair, probably has more power in his hands than Gastelum. But I don't think he's going to be able to keep up with or match the pace that Gastelum sets, because Gastelum does throw a high volume of strikes, Rodriguez not so much. So good stylistic matchup for Gastelum. It should win. Wouldn't be surprised if these rounds are reasonably close and the fight is reasonably close, but Gastelum should get the job done here. So from a betting point of view, excuse me, from a betting point of view, it's a bit of a dead fight. Would not get me excited betting Gastelum as this big of a favourite, especially with all the issues going on with his weight. Could be a sign of an injury, you know, something like that. Could also be a sign that he loves cheeseburgers, but you know what I'm saying. I'm not prepared to find out in this odds range, if I'm being honest. I just think it's too risky. And because this is likely to be a stand-up fight, and Rodriguez is second best when it comes to striking, I have no interest in betting on Rodriguez as the underdog. So for me, this fight is an easy pass. Now, in terms of the over-under, both guys are obviously very tough. They're absolute decision-haters. If you look at Gastelum's record, you know, his last, well, 4 of his last 5 have gone to a decision. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of his last 10 have gone to a decision, actually. Actually 7 of his last 9. Even this fight almost went to a decision. And if we look at Rodriguez's record, his fights tend to go deep as well. He frequently goes to decisions. But unfortunately, the odds reflect the fact this fight is very likely to go deep. So again, bit of a dead fight for betting. Not much upside in betting the over. And I certainly wouldn't be betting the under on a matchup like this. Both guys are tough. Both guys have got good cardio. Neither are crazy dangerous either, to be fair, I would say. Rodriguez has got a bit more power in his hands, but for the most part, they're both volume strikers. And then if we look at the props, the only prop I would consider would be Gastelum by decision. The odds are absolutely terrible, though, so I won't be betting that. So, now let's break down the fight between Shara the Bullet Valentina, just kidding, in his dreams, Momedov, versus Antonio Trocoli. I've lost count of how many times the combination of fighters that Momedov and Trocoli are supposed to be facing in the last 2 weeks has changed. If we go to the list of matchups that were scheduled this week, obviously Momedov was supposed to face Jolton Lutterbach. He was also supposed to fight Ihor Peteria, and of course Trocoli was supposed to fight Aliskerov last week. And it's all been fucked up, and now they're facing one another. Awesome. So let's start off by taking a look at the odds on this one. We can see that Magomed is the favourite at average odds of about 1.17, which is actually hilarious to me, which is minus 588 for an implied probability of 85%. And if we take a look at the odds on Trocoli, he's around an average of 5.50, which is going to be plus 450 for an implied probability of 18%. So Momedov, 30 years old, 6'2", 73 inch reach, and he's undefeated, and people love that, especially when you have a name that ends in "ov", you're from Russia, and you look like a Bond villain. And Trocoli is 33 years old, 6'5", with an 82 inch reach. So look at this guy. He has a staggering 9 inch reach advantage over Momedov, which statistically gives him around about a 70% chance of winning. So if we look at his odds, they're around about 5.50. Look at that, 5.50. Can you believe it? That gives him an implied probability of 18%. And the thing is, we know statistically fighters that have a 9 inch reach advantage over their opponent win around 70% of the time. That's not a bad margin of value over the bookies if you just blind bet that statistic long term. You can also see he's taller. Both guys about the same age. Nothing major going on there. And even though Trocoli is kind of taking the fight on short notice, and it isn't ideal that he has to fly from Las Vegas to where this event is taking place, obviously in Saudi Arabia, that's not ideal. However, Trocoli has been in camp for the fight against Aliskerov, which was scheduled for last week, so he should be in reasonably good shape. What I also find interesting is that Trocoli was a big underdog against Aliskerov, which I kind of understand, but he's pretty much the same odds, like not that much worse odds, against this guy that looks like a Bond villain. Can you believe it? Can you believe it? Or maybe we're a bit too aggressive with the odds. Let's drop it down to 5.5. So we'll keep that up because the odds are very important in this fight. Really very important for us to talk about. So, we has a dilemma. We has a dilemma, ladies and gentlemen. We has a dilemma. Now, on last week's YouTube video, if we go to last week's YouTube video, right? Let's go to the channel. Okay, if we go to channel. What's up, guys? Hope you have. And we look at the videos, we could see the title and then in the thumbnail it says going for 10-0. Obviously, I'm referring to the winning streak that we're on at the moment in pre-fight bets, right? So if we look at our pre-fight bets, we are currently on an 8-bet winning streak. I mean, technically it's 9. But it isn't 9. It looks like it's 9 in our bets table. Because Sarukian was a winner for us, but it isn't really, because the Hill fight took place after the Sarukian fight, but my database just automatically displays things in this order. I can't do much about it. But anyway, we've won 8 bets in a row. Lucinda and Barboza came through for us in this parlay. Then we had Carlos Diego Ferreira, very nice big winner against Mateus Rebecki. Sean Woodson came through for us. So did Hakeem Buckley. So did Mr. Esteban Ribovic. So did Angela Hill. We had a nice parlay here. Chalky. And then Mr. Makachev, Mr. Almeida came through for us very nicely on UFC 302. We haven't had any pre-fight bets since. We've been keeping it tight. The last few events have been dreadful for betting. This event is also dreadful for betting. But now we have a dilemma. It's been a long time since I went 10-0 on pre-fight bets. I think we can do it if we keep things really tight and be really smart and wait for strong positions like these to pop up, where we can bet big and aggressive and be very, very confident that we're going to win, right? I think we can go 10-0. I don't think it'll be that hard. However, this puts us in a difficult position because I do feel the odds on this fight are utterly outrageous. Utterly outrageous. Now, I'll be honest with you, I don't know a whole lot about Mr. Trocoli because there isn't that much footage available on him. If we look at his record, we can see that he hasn't fought in 2.5 years. I believe he got popped for, I think, nandrolone's a steroid. Pretty sure. So he failed a drugs test back in 2019. For some reason, the UFC thought they'd still give him a contract anyway. But the last time we really got a good look at this guy was all the way back in 2016 when he fought Diego Lima. This fight was obviously 8 years ago. These fights are not available online, and so we have to base our opinions on this guy pretty much based on a fight that took place 8 years ago, and he doesn't look good in that fight against Diego Lima, to be fair. Looks very slow, flat, bad defensively, doesn't do anything particularly well. And I don't even know why this guy is in the UFC, and this goes back to what I was saying in the breakdown, or the introduction for the breakdown between Aliskerov and Whittaker. What is Dana White doing? What are you doing signing guys like this? Hasn't fought in 2.5 years. Failed a drugs test on the Contender Series in 2019. Doesn't look very good in his past fights. Like, what are we doing? Why is this guy being given a contract in the Super Bowl of mixed martial arts? I don't know. The UFC's going to the absolute dogs, and Dana is running the company into the ground with shit like this. But anyway, doesn't change the fact that this fight now is very, 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 very interesting for betting, because even though Shara Bullet Magomedov shares a nickname with Valentina Shevchenko and is undefeated and is Russian and his name ends in Dov, so he must be good, and he looks like a Bond villain, and he's all scary and everything, and people on YouTube videos will tell you this guy's amazing. Despite all these things, he's not very good. He isn't very good. And the only place you'll find truth and honesty in this world's in the fight footage. And if you look at the fight footage, he ain't very good. He shouldn't be a 1.17 favourite over any motherfucker in the UFC. And he's also a bad dude, because there's that video of him like punching a guy in a shopping mall, and karma's a motherfucker. It will get him. Gets everybody. You can't dodge karma. I do believe that. I'm not a religious man, but karma will get you. Be very careful how you treat people. Treat people how you want to be treated. So he does appear to be a bad guy. And you know what they say, be careful. Be humble or life will humble you, right? Learned that lesson the hard way many times over the years. So this is a real interesting fight, because even though Magomedov, from what I've seen, is a better striker than Trocoli, we saw in his fight against Bruno Silva that the guy has no takedown defense and no ground game. So what I'm going to do is just bring up a little bit of footage to show you, because I know a lot of people watching this will have watched all kinds of people on YouTube telling them that because this guy's undefeated and he looks like a James Bond villain, he's a future champion. But if you actually look at the footage, you will see something very different. Who would have thought, right? Actually, looking at what fighters' strengths and weaknesses are may actually give us some clues as to how they may perform in future fights. Who thought that could be a thing? But anyway, what I want to show you here, we're not going to focus on the striking because obviously based on past performances it's pretty clear Magomedov's the better striker in this matchup. However, what I do want to show you is his takedown offense and ground game, or lack of. So we will skip to that. Here we go. So he's outstriking Bruno Silva in this fight. You know, he looks reasonably good on the feet. You know, he's got a decent chin. He eats some bombs from Silva, which is impressive, as we know Silva hits very hard. Then look how bad his takedown offense and ground game is. So here we can see Silva. I mean, Silva's a kickboxer as well, right? Silva's a kickboxer, so getting taken down and controlled by this guy isn't great, to be fair. So nice double leg there from Silva. And then Magomedov just goes to close guard. Now, obviously, it's a bit of a red flag. When you see someone get taken down as easily as that, you want to see them try to create space themselves as soon as they hit the ground and try to pop back up to their feet as quickly as they possibly can. But that's not what Magomedov does here. He stays in the close guard and just throws punches and elbows off his back for the remainder of the round. So he just basically fights from guard, throwing elbows, which is all great and everything. But obviously we know 9 times out of 10, if you're on your back in MMA, that's a losing position. So we'll skip through little bits of this. So this breakdown video doesn't end up being super long. But what is really concerning for me about Magomedov's ground game here is that Silva actually makes the mistake of posturing up and giving Magomedov tons of space on the bottom. Enough space to quickly pop back up to his feet. And instead of taking that invitation to pop back up to his feet, Magomedov continues to just kind of throw kicks and punches off his back. I mean, look how much space he's got here. He should be trying to get to his knees and scramble back up to his feet, but Magomedov just shows no urgency, which allows Silva to go back into his guard. And we can just skip through. You know, look how much space Magomedov has got here in this position. You know, Silva's damn near sat up in his guard. Magomedov could easily push off on the chest of Silva with his feet and scramble back up to his feet, but he doesn't seem to know how. So, and he just goes back to close guard. So, I mean, we can skip through. That's kind of made my point on that. And here, Silva just kind of lets him back up to his feet, right? He's like, yo, you want to get up, bro? Should we stand and strike a bit more? Magomedov's like, nah, mate, I just want to lie here and kick you in the thighs. Very strange. And then Silva goes back into his guard. So Magomedov shows here that his takedown offense is very bad. And he's at a very, very low level on the ground. So, I mean, he's dreadful. Really, really bad on the ground, right? Very, very bad on the ground. I mean, look at this guy. He isn't good. So then if we go into round 3, Silva, after having so much success in round 2, shoots another takedown. Who can blame him? Magomedov goes down easily again. Goes straight to close guard. And again, we're going to skip through because you're seeing the same shit. Silva posturing up, giving him loads of space to scramble back up to his feet. He doesn't take it. And just Magomedov looks absolutely dreadful on the ground. He looks dreadful. Absolutely dreadful. Eventually Magomedov works his way back up to his feet. And then quickly gets taken back down. I mean, he did stuff that takedown. But then gets caught with his hand in a cookie jar, overly aggressive in the clinch, and then again just lies on his back for the rest of the round. So this guy looked like a one. What are the odds on him? 1.17. Does this guy look like a 1.17 minus 588 favourite to you? Implied probability, 85% chance of winning, even though Trocoli has a 9-inch reach advantage. Is probably juiced to the gills because there's no drug testing in the UFC anymore. And on top of that, actually has grappled in his past fights. Doesn't look particularly good doing it, and I can show you that now. But if we look at Trocoli's last fight against Oezdemir. Now I will warn you before I put this on, the guy that Trocoli's fighting here looks in worse shape than me, which isn't good because I'm definitely not in good shape. So that ain't great. But anyway, all the same, you can only beat what's put in front of you. So here we can see Oezdemir looking very out of shape, but there's a nice little double leg there from Trocoli, right? Nice little double, and he goes to work on the ground and looks for back takes and shit and gets a submission and everything. It's all good. So there's a bit of grappling there. So boys, what do we do? What do we do? On one hand, it would be really, really, really nice if we were to hit 10 winning bets in a row. That would be awesome, right? We haven't done that for a long time. It would be pretty cool if we could hit 10 winning bets in a row. And if we take a high risk gamble on Mr. Trocoli this weekend and he loses, like say he doesn't try to grapple, or say Magomedov's takedown defense is improved, or say Trocoli's not as good on the ground as we thought he was, and he just gets fucking dominated, it's going to suck that we blew our opportunity to go 10-0 on a high risk gamble on Mr. Trocoli, right? But you know what? It would be an absolute Chad move if we extended our winning run to 9-0 with another bet on a very, very high risk underdog in Trocoli, especially after we recently hit one on Mr. Carlos Diego Ferreira when we bet him to beat Mr. Mateus Rebecki. Isn't that interesting? And what's kind of interesting about Trocoli is we haven't really seen him in the last 5 years, because obviously this guy was very low level and the fight ended very quick. So Trocoli might actually be very good. You know, he might actually be a lot better than he's looked in the past. I mean, the last time, even that fight that we just watched where he shot the double leg and shit, that was a long time ago now, right? 2.5 years ago. So, boys, what do we do? Let me know in Discord. Let me know in the comments below. Do we preserve our opportunity to go 10-0 on pre-fight bets? Or do we make an absolute Chad move and bet Antonio Trocoli this weekend to get the job done at big underdog odds, because this guy's not very good, even though he looks scary and his name ends in Dov, and every YouTuber on the planet will be like, oh, he's undefeated and he's from Russia and his name is Magomedov and he has a beard, therefore I think my pick is he's gonna win this fight, right? What do we do, boys? Do we put our winning streak at risk, or do we go for the Chad move and bet Trocoli? I think we go Trocoli. What do you think? Let me know in Discord. Let me know in the comments below what you think we should do. Obviously, I'll post a bet in Discord if we go for it. I'm probably going to go for it. Haven't made my mind up yet. In fact, I have made my mind up. Let's go for it. Let's bet Trocoli. Let's do it. What's the worst that could happen? There's so many reasons to like Trocoli in this odds range. The 9-inch reach advantage. The fact that Magomedov has no takedown defense, no ground game, and we saw Trocoli shoot a takedown in his last fight. The fact that we haven't really seen this guy in the last 5 years, so he could actually be really, really good now. You know what I mean? There's a lot of reasons to like this guy. You'd have to be blind, stupid. You'd have to be really dumb to bet Magomedov in this odds range, in my opinion. And this is a fight where the odds don't make any sense to me. I don't know why the odds are the way they are. If I'm missing something, let me know, guys. If I'm missing something, please let me know. If, like, Trocoli's got a staph infection in his eyeballs, or if he's fighting with two broken legs or something, let me know, boys. But from where I am, seems like there's good value here on Mr. Trocoli. Let me know what you think. Okay, so in terms of over-under, well, the fight's only really been announced in the last 24 hours, so we don't have prop bets, over-unders, all that kind of stuff yet. It's a bit of a shame. So we'll move on. Hope you found that useful. Let me know what you think of the bet on Trocoli, though. If we break the winning streak, it ain't going to feel good. But you know what? He who dares wins. And we didn't get this far in life, making a profit on basically everything that we do by betting like pussies. So, Trocoli it is. Alright, now let's break down the final fight on this main card. And remember, if you do like these breakdowns and you want to watch breakdown videos for all the prelim fights, you can get them on my website, MMABettingTips.com, as well as every bet that I place on the Ultimate Fighting Championship, the Super Bowl in mixed martial arts, allegedly. Not sure how strong or valid that statement is anymore. But anyway, let's now get into the final fight on this main card, which is going to be Johnny Walker versus Volkov Oezdemir. So both these guys in the even money odds range. If you shop about, you can bet both of them at about 1.91 minus 110 for an implied probability of 52%. And if we look at the tail of the tape, Walker is 32 years old, 6'6" with an 82-inch reach. Oezdemir, 34 years old, 6'2" with a 75-inch reach. So both guys about the same age, but we can see Walker has a very nice 7-inch reach advantage, and he's a lot taller than Oezdemir as well. And to be fair, since training at SBG Ireland, Walker is making big improvements from fight to fight, and he's getting better and better at using his length and his reach. So this is one of those matchups where it's kind of difficult to predict before it takes place. I don't have a super strong read on this one, but I'll just kind of give you everything that I noticed in their past fights, and then maybe it'll help you make your own mind up on this one. So I don't see there being any grappling in this fight. It's very rare that either of these will try to take their opponent down. Occasionally, if you see one of them get hurt very bad or struggling in a fight, they'll look for a takedown. But for the most part, both these guys like to stand and strike. So Walker isn't really the marauding, wild, chaotic knockout artist these days that throws crazy flying shit and spinning shit. Occasionally he does, and he's still very dangerous. Anyone that is 6'6" with an 82-inch reach that weighs over 200 pounds and cage fights for a living is obviously going to be pretty dangerous. But generally speaking, if you look at his recent fights, unless he's facing some pretty low-level opponents, he's way less dangerous than he used to be. Because he understands now that when you throw spinning shit or flying shit at your opponent, two things can happen which are not good. First thing is that you leave yourself wide open to big counters, which is kind of what happened in the Jamal Hill fight. Also the Corey Anderson fights, that's not good. And the second thing that can happen is that you burn through a lot of energy without achieving a whole lot. So if you look at Walker earlier in his career, he was one of these guys that would come out the gate super hard, throwing spinning shit, you know, trying to kill everyone in a minute flat. But now he understands that he needs to pace himself better and fight smarter and more tactically over a 15-minute period. It doesn't mean you won't get some crazy from Walker in the fight. You will. That is a part of his brand. But for the most part, when he's facing a decent level of opponent that he respects, which I believe, you know, he will respect Oezdemir, Walker's much more likely to look to use his length and his footwork and his movement to engage in a kickboxing match and kind of chip away at you and try to outpoint you, which for the most part is what he did in the Anthony Smith fight, and I think that's most likely the version of Walker we're going to get this weekend. So this is potentially a tough fight for Oezdemir, because one of Oezdemir's weaknesses is that he is a bit stiff, he is a bit slow, he is a bit flat-footed, and he tends to plod his way around the octagon, stalking his opponents, looking to box them up and engage with them in boxing range. And to be fair, Walker doesn't really play that game. He's quite mobile, he's quite light on his feet, he's got good footwork, good movement, and these days he's using his length better. So we know Walker likes to use that jab, and in particular the leg kicks, to just chip away at you from a safe distance. And it's not easy to get inside and land on him, because he does like to circle away and, like I say, use his length to chip away at you from behind those leg kicks. Now when you do get inside on Walker, he doesn't read his opponents particularly well. He does panic a little bit, and he can be caught with his chin up high and exposed. So this is an interesting clash of styles because Oezdemir is the better boxer out of the two. Walker has more of a kick-based style of striking. But because of the footwork, the movement, the length, the reach of Walker, it's not going to be easy for Oezdemir to get the fight into a range where he can actually use his boxing. So for that reason, it's quite an interesting clash of styles. Oezdemir also has really good leg kicks, but obviously with the difference in length between the two, it's a lot easier for Walker to land those leg kicks than it will be for Oezdemir, because Oezdemir has to get closer to Walker to be able to land those leg kicks than Walker has to get to land them, because he's obviously much longer. So this is one of those matchups where my lean would be Oezdemir, just because I would always favour the better boxer in a stand-up fight. But I do think the length, the footwork, the kicking game of Walker can cause Oezdemir problems, because Oezdemir is a bit stiff, is a bit slow, is very hittable, doesn't do the best of getting inside on his opponents. So my lean's Oezdemir, but not with a great amount of confidence. So in terms of the over-under on this one, we can see that the over 1.5 rounds is actually super tempting on this fight. I'm very, very, very tempted to bet that, because, like I say, when Walker's facing a decent level of opponent, which I believe Oezdemir is, he's more likely to be patient, take it slow, look to get into a kickboxing match and try to outpoint you like he did against Anthony Smith and Thiago Santos. We know Oezdemir's got a good chin. 3 of his last 4 have gone to a decision, and 4 of his last 6 have gone to a decision. It's not easy to knock this guy out. You know, if we look at his record, he's lost 7 fights, and he's only been knocked out one. He's been knocked out once in, 26 pro fights. It's not bad. So I do quite like the over 1.5 rounds on this, and we'll more than likely go for that. We'll more than likely go for it. So, in terms of the prop bets, Oezdemir by decision, I think, is most likely outcome, but the odds are they're tricky. They are tricky. They don't get me excited, but I do think that it's the most likely prop to hit. So it's not something I'd be betting myself, but if I was to take a prop, that's what I would go for. So I hope you found that useful. If you did, please hit the like button below to help my channel grow. Subscribe if you haven't already. These videos take a lot of work, so if you like and subscribe, it helps me a lot. And if you like these breakdown videos, or you want to, gain access to my live bets for UFC, live bets for football, pre-fight bets for UFC, we're profitable on everything we do. Check out the links in the description below. Thank you very much for watching. Got a big card next week, UFC 303. We've had a dead few weeks for betting on the UFC, some shitty cards. Hopefully things start to pick up and get better next week though, because UFC 303 is looking pretty interesting. So thank you very much for watching. Take care. Love you all. I'll see you next week. Nice one, guys. Bye.